and welcome back to the Hylights podcast. My name is Femi, and I'm a transactional attorney here in Houston.
And my name is Patrick. I'm an arbitration lawyer, also here in Houston.
Well, podcast listeners, we have a wonderful episode of the Hylights podcast. We have the Honorable Judge Vanessa Gilmore here in the virtual podcast studio. How are you doing, Judge?
Everything is great today. Thank you for asking.
Awesome. Thank you so much for just joining us in this very interesting time for the world and for the judiciary and the legal field. We just wanted to spend some time to talk to you about being a federal judge, your career, and what else is going on. So a little bit of background for the judge. Judge Vanessa D. Gilmore is a U.S. District Judge of the U.S. District Court for the Southern District of Texas. Judge Gilmore was nominated by President Bill Clinton in 1994 and was confirmed by the Senate in that same year. Prior to her appointment, Judge practiced civil litigation at Vickery, Kilbride, Gilmore, and Vickery. Judge Gilmore's docket covered a wide range of cases, ranging from criminal and immigration matters to patent and trademark cases, and it still does. An established author, Judge Gilmore has published 4 books on topics ranging from her life as an adoptive mother, the trials and tribulation of children of incarcerated parents, and her own life as a federal judge. She received her BS in business from Hampton University and her JD from the University of Houston Law Center in 1981, having practiced law in the Houston area for 40 years. So you're what we would call an accomplished judge. Is that fair to say?
I guess so, but you know what? When you said 40 years, I kind of shivered for a minute. I thought it cannot be 40 years already, Femi, but I guess it is. 1981, right. And it's 2021. Oh. It's been 40 years.
Right. How does that mark? Wow.
It's interesting because nowadays, people that go to law school, certainly, some of the people that I went to law school and Patrick as well, they have a very truncated sense of what it means to be a lawyer. They sort of walk in and say, oh, this is just another step. This is just another thing that I'm going to do in my set of careers. How did you feel when you started going to law school at UH in late '79? What was the life that you had wanted to set out for yourself at that point?
Well, I was so very fortunate that when I was at the University of Houston, I took a class, a law practice skills class from an adjunct professor there. And he called me at the end of the class and said, "Did you get the highest grade in my class?" And I said, "I got the next to the highest grade." And he said, "Great, come work for me." And so I ended up going to work for, it was a small sort of boutique litigation firm. He said, "You're going to be an amazing trial lawyer. This is, I think, the path that you were meant to be on." And so I went to work for a small boutique litigation firm, and I had a very, very active trial practice, which is the advantage, I think, of going to a small firm over going to a big firm where you're doing depositions and doing discovery and writing briefs for the first year lawyers for several years before you ever get a chance to make an appearance in the court. I was at a small firm. There were just 4 people there, and I was trying cases very soon after I started with the law firm, going to court every week on a regular basis, getting a lot of courtroom experience, trial experience, motion practice, and I loved it. It was a little nerve-wracking at first. I took Andy's word for it that it was the path that I was meant to be on and that it was something that I was very well suited for, and he was right. I loved being a trial lawyer, and I had a great career as a trial lawyer and probably would still be a trial lawyer, but for the fact that something intervened. It was called, "Do you want to be a federal judge?" It intervened in the path that I'd seen for myself.
So when that happened, as Femi mentioned that you went to University of Houston Law Center, I was reading yesterday and I didn't realize, so you were the first graduate from the University of Houston to be nominated to be on the federal bench, is that right?
That is true, and so at the time it was, I was the very first one. There have been a couple after me. One gentleman who went to the tax court and another district court judge who was up in Wyoming, who's now actually, he was appointed after me, but he was older than me, so he's already retired from the judiciary. But yeah, I was the very first one.
And how was that a factor at all in kind of how you felt about the nomination, or how other people in either from U of H or how other people in the legal community felt about your nomination at that time?
You mean in terms of where I went to school?
Yeah.
Oh, no, I don't know that factored in so much. I was just really very, very active in the community. I think that I had a really active trial practice, and I tell people this all the time because people ask all the time, how do you get noticed to become a federal judge? You can be a great trial lawyer. You have to be a good trial lawyer. You have to be good at your craft, but it's a public service job. And so I think that it's important for people to see you as someone who is willing to be a public servant in the community. And I think that I was very much seen that way because of my activities outside of the courtroom and different nonprofit organizations that I was involved in and other community organizations that I was involved in. And that's the thing that I think was as important in terms of me being able to make that transition and be noticed to be considered for the federal judiciary as being a good trial lawyer.
Yeah.
So Judge Gilmore, can you let us know what was the exact path from being an accomplished trial lawyer to then receiving that nomination? How did that come about?
So as I said, I think that the thing that is important for people to understand is if you want a job in public service, you have to show that you're committed to public service. I was very active in the community. I was president of the YWCA of Houston during a very tumultuous time for that organization. Governor Ann Richards called me to Austin, to me sort of out of the blue, and wanted me to come and interview with her. I went there and it was for an opportunity to be on the board of the Texas Department of Commerce. I wasn't sure that really fit my experience and my background as a trial lawyer. And I said, business people and trial lawyers, that's kind of like not a thing that goes together really. And she said, no, I heard about you. She said, you did a lot of work for the YWCA and you saved that organization from, being really almost non-existent in Houston. And she said the Texas Department of Commerce was in a lot of trouble at that time. And she needed somebody who could come in and help save that agency from being sunsetted. And the thing she said to me that I think was the most interesting was, she said, I heard that you're not the kind of person who hides your light under a bushel. And I didn't even understand what that term meant at the time, but it comes from the Sermon on the Mount. And it means somebody who doesn't hide their talent or abilities. And in fact, there's a song that has come from that. It's called This Little Light of Mine. I'm sure everybody's probably heard that song before. And she said, you will be the kind of person who will speak up and will be heard. And so I did accept the challenge to be on the board of the Texas Department of Commerce, which was basically a full-time for free job. It was a volunteer opportunity. In which during the legislative session, I worked, 30, 40, 50 hours a week in Austin, doing the work for the Texas Department of Commerce, traveling around the country, doing business development, job training development, and tourism development for the state of Texas. I worked on initiatives to increase U.S. trade opportunities with Mexico. I worked on the NAFTA treaty. I became president of Texans for NAFTA. I traveled around the country a lot, seeking businesses to come and move to the state of Texas to increase economic opportunities for Texans. That was a lot of work. I did that in addition to having my full-time trial practice. Wow. And so one of the gentlemen that I traveled a lot with was a gentleman by the name of Bob Kruger, and he was head of the Railroad Commission. And he and I traveled together a lot around the country looking for businesses and that were interested in looking at Texas as a potential home. And when President Clinton became president, he took our then U.S. Senator, whose name was Lloyd Benson, and took him and made him Secretary of the Treasury. And that left an opening on the Senate that the governor filled. And the governor appointed Bob Kruger to be the senator in place of Senator Lloyd Benson. At the time, I knew Bob Kruger well because we worked together quite a bit while we were working on business development issues. He was chair of the Railroad Commission. And I said to him, I'd like to be on your committee to help select the federal judges. There were 10 vacancies on the federal bench in Texas at that time. And he said, okay, you can do that. And so I thought that was what my role was going to be. But then the committee members had a different idea. They decided that they did not want me on the committee, that they thought instead that they wanted to nominate me to the federal bench. I was not looking for that opportunity. I hadn't applied.
Wow.
I wasn't thinking about it.
Yeah. So instead of you making the list, you ended up on the list.
On the list.
Right.
And Femi, I want to tell you what, that was not an opportunity that I was seeking out, but you know how to make God laugh, don't you? Tell him your plans.
Exactly.
And so that was what happened to me. I was presented with that opportunity, and because it had not been one that I had really been seeking, I felt like I needed to do some real soul searching in terms of trying to figure out whether or not it was the right thing for me. The first person I called was my pastor at Wheeler Avenue Baptist Church, Bill Lawson, his name Reverend William Lawson. And I called Reverend Lawson and I said, you know, something terrible has happened. I was crying. He said, what?
Something terrible.
I said, I want to be a federal judge. He said, what? He said, are you crying? I was like, yeah. And he said, ask yourself 2 questions. Can you do a good job? Will it be good for the community? I said, I can do a good job. He said, great. I think it'll be good for the community for you to be there. Call me back when you have a real problem. Click, hung the phone up on me. And so I was like, wow, okay. So then I called Governor Richards, who was also my mentor. And so, Governor, you know, they want me to go on the federal bench. And she said, oh, don't do it. That's a terrible idea. I said, why? And she talked all the way she talked. And I said, why? And she said, I got plans for you. She said, I'm going to run you for the Railroad Commission. You're going to be on the ticket with me and you're going to run for the Railroad Commission. That's what you can do. I was like, oh, okay. And so then I thought, that's interesting. So then I called my mom, my best mentor. And I said, Mom, the governor says I shouldn't become a federal judge because she wants me to run on the ticket with her to be on the Railroad Commission. And my mother said, I never heard you say you wanted to run for statewide office. She said, if I'd heard you say that even just once, I would say go for it. She said, but you know what? You got on the fast train. And sometimes you think that you can just pull the bell and get off anytime you want to. And then you end up on the fast train to somebody else's destiny. I think it's time for you to pull the bell and get off. And I thought, wow, she's right. I never saw I wanted to run for statewide office. And so I pulled the bell and I got off and I went to the federal bench, and the governor went on to run against George W. Bush. And she was beaten badly in that election. And so she went on to her life after politics, and I went on to my life as a federal judge some almost 27 years ago now.
Wow.
And so I think there's a lot there. So you said that,
a lot to unpack in all of that.
There's a lot to unpack. So you mentioned that Governor Richards so you already had a relationship with her. What was this prior to you engaging with was it the WLCA?
The Texas Department of Commerce?
Yes. What did you have a relationship with her before then, or?
I knew her vaguely. I knew her vaguely because she was very involved. I was involved in Leadership Texas, which is a leadership organization for women, and she was very involved in that. The Foundation for Women's Resources, which was the umbrella organization over Leadership Texas. And so I knew her vaguely from the Leadership Texas interaction, but not that well. My real opportunity to meet her and start working with her was when she asked me to be on the board of the Texas Department of Commerce. And then I did that for 3 years. And so we got to know each other very well when I was doing work for the Department of Commerce.
Right. And so, you know, it seems as if the work that you were doing in the community before you were even contacted by her to engage in this grand scheme of affairs was already leading you towards public service, regardless of whether she helped you out.
I think that's a fair statement because, you know, I loved being a trial lawyer. I love my work as a trial lawyer, but I will say that it only appealed to sort of half of my personality. There was another half of my personality that needed to feel like I was in the community doing things for other people besides myself.
Right.
And so this whole time you finished from University of Houston and you're working in Houston as a trial attorney, but you're not originally from the city, right? How was it that you decided to set up roots and get so involved in the public community like you did?
Well, I grew up in Silver Spring, Maryland, right outside of DC. And so my parents both worked for the federal government. I went to school in Virginia. I went to Hampton University in Hampton, Virginia. And I moved here literally the day after I graduated from college. I came to Houston originally to be a fashion buyer for Foley's department store. I literally drove here in my air-conditioned Mustang the day after I graduated from college and drove straight here to Houston to begin my career as a fashion buyer. And I worked at Foley's, but I went to college very young. I went to college when I was 16, graduated when I was 20. So when I moved here, you know, I'm thinking I'm fully grown. My parents are thinking I'm still their baby. And so they're still, you know, all in my business. And so I went out of town one weekend without telling them where I was going. And they asked the apartment man, this was in the pre-cell phone, pre-answer.
Yeah, I mean, you were honestly off the grid at this point.
Yeah, I mean, talk about, you could be like totally off the grid back in those days. And so my parents were looking for me. They couldn't find me because if you weren't home sitting by your phone that was hanging on the wall in your kitchen, you weren't going to be able to be reached by phone. You know, we still were using stone tablets and chisels back in those days. And so they asked the apartment complex people to go in my apartment and look around and see where I was or if I was okay. And I was really into photography back then. I mean, I was like big time into photography. I had a dark room in my house. I'd won all these trophies and awards, and I had all this real fancy camera equipment. And they went in and helped themselves to all my stuff. So when I came home, my door was wide open and all my stuff was gone. All my camera equipment and stuff was gone. And so, you know, I confronted them after my parents said, oh yeah, we had the people go in your apartment. And they said, oh, you had a break-in. I was like, the door was unlocked. I didn't have a break-in. And plus I didn't live any place where it was likely that I would have had a break-in. And so a friend of mine talked me into going to the law library and looking up how to sue them. And I sued them under a theory called recipsa loquitur. You guys remember that one? The
Yes.
thing spoke for itself.
Yeah.
The thing spoke for itself was, I had a key, they had a key, somebody came in with the key, my stuff was gone. I sued them, went to court, tried my little case, got my little money, and then I said, hey, I think I'm gonna do this some more. So then I hurried up, took the LSAT, and ended up going to law school at the University of Houston. I started in 1979. And at the time that I started, I mean, it was sort of the first year that there was really a critical mass of women going to the law school. There had not been that many women before that. And that was sort of the very first year that happened. And in fact, in the teaching units, they didn't even have bathrooms for women. So they took a piece of paper and wrote women on it and taped it over the men's restroom sign and said, that's y'all's bathroom over there. Ignore the urinal in there.
Wow. You know, it's that's perspective, because, you know, there are issues that law students face today, but that's a massive barrier. The fact that, you know, you don't have these separate bathrooms, as well as I'm assuming that the numbers were fairly low for women. How many women were in your classes?
Well, no. So my year, the year that I started, 1979, I would say I don't want to be exact because I don't recall, but I would say that there were, you know, probably approaching 30–40% of the class were female the year that I started. And that was like a huge change.
Yeah.
That was the first year that it had been like that.
Yeah.
And then, but there still weren't that many, at least at the University of Houston, there weren't that many African-American students. In my section, there was 3 of us. And then the other 2 dropped out. So there was just me. They both dropped out at the end of the first semester. And so there was just me and my section at the law school. So it was what it was. It was just sort of a different time.
So, you know, in that context, as being a Black woman who's entering a profession that's predominantly white and male, you know, how was your first year of practice?
Well, like I said, I was so fortunate to ended up going to work for the gentleman who had been my adjunct professor. So he had seen me an entire semester in a class that involved a lot of mock trials and argument and moot court. And so he'd seen me for a whole semester, and he said he had just made up his mind he was going to get me. And so he made the offer, and I really had intended to go back to Maryland after I finished law school, back to my hometown. But then I didn't, but Andy made me an offer, and I ended up deciding to stay here. And I think that that was really actually a good thing. I had actually accepted a job at the district attorney's office in Rockville, Maryland. And I had planned on going there and working in the DA's office. But I think that that would have been a very different path for me than the one that I ended up on.
Yeah. You found your way back to public service eventually. Really cool. And I mean so on that note, you're obviously getting incredible and substantive like litigation and trial experience for this part of your career.
Sure.
And when you're tapped to become a federal judge, how important is that experience, both in terms of, and do you have any concrete examples of where that experience comes into play, where maybe a judge without that kind of experience could have a different take?
Well, I mean, we're trial judges, and so we should know how to try cases. I tried my very last case in the courtroom that is my courtroom now, a patent infringement case. I did a lot of intellectual property litigation back when I was still practicing. I mean, it's a very specific area of practice. And if you're going to be a trial judge, I think you should be a trial lawyer. I think that understanding, not just knowing what the rules of evidence are, but understanding and knowing how they might apply in real time, knowing how they might impact the way that evidence comes in, being able to understand how to interact with the jury, understanding the whole process that you need to follow in terms of making sure that the rules of procedure are followed, being comfortable in the dynamic of interacting between the court and the lawyer, the court and the witnesses. I think it's just a matter of the experience definitely helps. And I think a lack of experience in that regard would give you a steep learning curve in terms of having some comfort level in interacting with lawyers, parties, witnesses, jury, during the course of litigation. Houston particularly is a very busy district. We probably, before COVID, have to do everything BC now, but before COVID, I would say we probably tried, 24, 25 cases a year. In the last couple of years, it's kind of slacked off. We haven't had quite as many, but for a time we were trying, a couple of cases a month. That's a lot of time spent in court. You need to be comfortable with that. You need to be comfortable with interacting with the lawyers. I mean, especially as a woman, and especially as an African-American woman, I think that, one of the things I probably didn't anticipate and had to figure out how to address and deal with is pushback from lawyers. But I'm not a shrinking violet. And so I figured out, I knew what I was doing, because I think just the comfort level of understanding trial practice and understanding what the dynamics are in a trial setting made me feel comfortable being able to control what was happening in my courtroom, even when I was getting pushback from lawyers sometimes.
Right. I would say, and you may have heard this, but some people have categorized you as a no-nonsense judge, but it's fair to say that most judges are no-nonsense, right? Like there are rules to follow.
I can't speak for everybody else. I only know what I'm doing. And I would definitely say that that's a fair characterization of me. I am no nonsense. Come prepared, mean what you say and say what you mean. And don't incorrectly make the assumption that I have not read everything that you've submitted to me in advance. I think people will give you briefs and they'll assume that maybe you don't have time to read them. I'm reading everything that I'm going to talk to you about. And if you misquote the law to me, then you do so at your own peril.
Right.
Kind of nonsense I'm not going to put up with. Let me put it to you that.
I remember, so full disclosure, I clerked for you in the summer of 2017. And I remember when One time we were having a chat and you asked me the question, how much time do you think I spend like reading and writing? And I think I probably said, oh, maybe 10, 20 hours. And like, no, that's like the majority of what I'm doing is reading and writing or reviewing other people's writing.
That's exactly right.
Yeah. I mean, so yeah, you're definitely reviewing nearly everything that's on the docket. Like that's where the work is.
Yeah, we do. We spend the largest majority of our time is writing. And so when people, say they want to come work with me because they want to be in court and they want to be in trial and all that, I was like, okay, so we're in trial a couple times a month, but that's like for 2 or 3 days. And the rest of the time we are writing, we are reading, we are working on dispositive motions. And so that's the largest part of the work that we do.
Yeah. Going back a little bit, so we spoke about being a trial lawyer and being a judge, and you mentioned that being a lawyer informs your role as a judge. But what are the, I guess, the key differences between practicing as a lawyer and a judge, and which one would you prefer? I guess if you have to pick.
The biggest difference is I don't have a dog in the hunt. I don't care who wins or loses.
Okay,
it's good to be the neutral. I'm just the referee. I'm just trying to keep things moving along smoothly the way that they're supposed to be moving along. When you're one of the lawyers, you have an interest in the outcome of the fight. I don't have any interest at all. I do not care. Who wins or who loses is going to come down. It's going to be based on how the law and the evidence, comes out and whether or not it supports your theory of the case or not. And I think that is a much better position to be in many ways, because you're not, you're not all, what you do is not tied to whether or not you have success in terms of winning or losing a particular case. I just have to do what I believe is right under the law, and that's it. It's a lot of freedom in that.
Has it ever been difficult to find that line for certain cases? I'm sure for some cases, maybe, based on summary judgment, okay, there isn't enough evidence, but have there been like neck and neck situations that have been hard to parse out?
What do you mean in terms of whether or not,
so
which way the law goes?
Right.
Every case. I'm balancing it back and forth until I come to the end, until I make a decision.
Right.
Yeah.
Sort of to that end, in enjoying being a neutral, do you approach bench trials differently than jury trials in terms of how you experience those proceedings?
On bench trials, I think the only difference is I probably study more. I probably read more and make sure that I understand the law more, because I'm not shy about asking questions. And usually bench trials are going to be in something really complex like patents. Obviously a lot of intellectual property we do as a bench trial. And so I approach that one differently in that I read a ton, both about the technology and about the issues that are likely to come up in that particular type of case, because I am not shy about stopping people and asking questions, particularly in patent infringement cases where it's often a battle of expert witnesses. Like one on one side says, oh, this is what this product does, and the other one says, no, it doesn't do that. I do not mind stopping and saying, I have no idea what you're talking about. If you need me to be the one to decide what this product was supposed to be doing what the inventor meant when he wrote this particular claim of this patent, then you need to slow down, back up, and tell me what it is. So I find myself doing a lot more studying on cases that are tried to the bench.
And you have to, I guess, sort of balance between how much you prepare before a trial versus waiting to hear what they say at trial and then doing maybe some follow-up reading afterwards before the decision.
I mean, obviously, you always have the option of reading later, but I think that in patent cases, particularly in technology cases, it's good to have an understanding of the technology before you go in there. It just is really helpful. It helps you follow it. The lawyers and the patent lawyers are really very good about doing great tutorials for the judges and helping you understand the technology. But and so you use that sort of like as your baseline, and then you read more if you feel like you need to understand more. But and then I ask a lot of questions, and I'm not opposed to asking for post-trial briefing on an issue. If it's some complicated technology or issue that I need to make sure that I have a full understanding of before I issue an opinion. People who try patent cases, I mean, they have millions of dollars at stake. And so you want to do your best that you can to make sure that you're giving them the best possible outcome.
Right. Does it ever seem like daunting or almost, it's not impossible, but nearly impossible when you have to deal with a certain area of law that may not pop up as much? Like, how do you go about that? Other than what you said, just briefing and, do you have to get into a new mindset for that?
No, that's the job.
That's just the job. Yeah.
It's the job. Every day I might end up with a case that I never heard of before, that an area of law that I'm not familiar with.
Yeah.
It's called reading.
I'll be upfront and say I was asking for a friend, not me. But.
Asking for a friend. Okay.
I mean, it really sounds, and I think this is the impression that I get from most judges, is that they really love the job with a passion, and that's why they're able to stick it out for so many years, because it's always different and it's always evolving. Is there anything?
Yeah, you say stick it out. That makes it sound so harsh, Patrick. That makes it sound like it's like a bird
in an environment where people increasingly change jobs. It seems like, especially maybe people say so about millennials when they try and like change jobs, not just in the legal profession, but I guess even more broadly. It does, I'm sure, to anyone in that generation, it does seem almost, I know in my job before law school at like a nonprofit, the idea of staying anywhere for decades seemed almost, but maybe because my age seemed so.
But it's a lifetime appointment.
Yeah.
and most people serve out their term.
Yeah. Is there, that's true. Well, so in that vein, is there anything through all this experience that you would say, there are so many things you love about it, of course. Is there anything that you could point to and be like, I would change this about how the job has been? Anything you would reform about being a member on the federal bench?
Nothing that I would reform about the job, but I mean, there are certain restrictions and limitations in terms of things that you can and cannot do, that you have and that you accept as part of your responsibility and burden of being a federal judge. I mean, you have to be careful in terms of the things that you do and stay outside of the court. You can't be involved in anything politically. You can't donate money. You can't support candidates. You can't raise money for nonprofit organizations that you're passionate about or that you have an interest in. No matter how meritorious the goals of different organizations are, you can't raise money. And so there are a lot of restrictions in terms of what you can and cannot do. So you just have to accept that as it just goes with the job. Would I change any of that? No, that's just what the job is.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just, you accept that your role in the community is going to be limited somewhat by your position. There's no reason to change that. It's to allow you to remain as a neutral and not somebody who's seen in a partisan way. Yeah. It's to prevent the possibility of bias. And so no, there's nothing about that I would change, but it is a change in your life and your lifestyle, particularly if you have been very involved in the community and politics before you became a judge, which I was. And so a lot of that got cut back. A lot of things that I was involved in, I had to kind of like stop being involved in because of potential conflicts of interest and other things like that. So, I mean, just is what it is.
Yeah.
So given the fact that you did have to step back from, activities that really informed your life and your practice, how did you fill in those gaps? Like, I know that judges can still engage in public service. It just has to be different. And so how do you do that?
Well, you just make sure that you pick public service activities that don't have a potential of an organization that's not going to be have a lot of litigation. So I spent 17 years on the board of directors of my undergraduate college, Hampton University in Virginia. Obviously, they were never going to have any litigation down here because they were in Virginia. So I spent a whole bunch of time on the board of at Hampton working on educational issues with them. Then I served on the board of directors of my son's school, his elementary and middle school, River Oaks Baptist School. I spent some years on the board of the River Oaks Baptist School. Right now, I'm serving on the board of the DePelchin Children's Center, and my interest in that organization came from the fact that that's where I adopted my son from, DePelchin Children's Center. And I felt that there was a real role for me to play and something that I could do there, and that not something that I was likely to have a big conflict with in terms of them appearing as a litigant before the court. It just isn't going to happen. I'm also on the board of Texas Children's Hospital. And so far, that's been so far so good. If something came up involving Texas Children's Hospital, then I would just obviously recuse myself from it and not be involved in it. But so far, that's not been anything problematic for me.
And would you say that, you know, now that you have perhaps more free time that would have been used up to do pro bono public service activities, that's allowed you to write, you know, books and become an established author?
Oh, I would say that my ability and my to write books came from the fact that I was a mom, and the fact that unlike my pre-baby life, where I was out and about going to events and activities and social stuff and charitable work and all kinds of stuff all over the community, once you have a baby, you are home every night if you're doing it right. And so I remember saying to my assistant when I first adopted my son, I was like, man, how do people do their evening events when they have babies? And she said, nobody's doing evening events when they have babies. Only you think that you can still keep doing that. The rest of us take the bus home and watch sitcoms at night. I was like, really? I was like, that's really what it's going to be like. She's like, rein it in, Judge, rein it in. We're going to be home every night with that baby. And so I was home every single night, and I wasn't out and about in the community doing community events, going to different functions, even going to plays and lectures and things that I enjoyed doing. I just wasn't doing any of that. I was home every night. And so the baby goes to bed at 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock at night. So you got like, I'm like, okay, now what am I going to do?
So you sort of reformed parenting then. You reformed, you know, being a mom. You found an outlet.
Well, yeah, so I could write. I had plenty of time because I was home every night with my baby. And so I was home, and so I could write, and so I could, you know, be productive during that time that I was at home. And so that's what I started doing. I started really just writing because he was home and I wanted to be home with him.
Right. I think there are people my age who are in the early stages of their legal career who have either had young children or are thinking of it in their relationships. As a person that has raised a child, you know, what are the challenges in being a person in the legal field and raising a child? You know, people have very chaotic schedules, and you know, they're just trying to figure that out. How can they go about that?
Well, here's my answer to this, because people sometimes say, oh my gosh, it looks like you have it all. I was like, who, me? The woman who got a baby at 45 years old? I don't think so. I was like, I think I forgot. I skipped a step or two, you know? My view on that is you can do everything well, but not at the same time. If your career is going blockbusters, your children are going to school with mismatched socks. And then and they're going to be sitting on somebody's couch saying, my dad never came to any of my games. I wanted my dad to be at my games and they didn't show up. I mean, you can do everything well, but not at the same time. If you are at a point in time in your career where it requires you to work 70, 80 hours a week, then something is going to fall off and not get the full attention. I think I see it as a constant battle of moving stuff from the front burner to the back burner. If your relationship's on the front burner, then you might not be putting in that 70 or 80 hours a week at work. If your children are on the front burner, then, you know, your job is probably, you're not going to be at the pinnacle of your career and your job. And so I think it's just a matter of always continuing to reprioritize what's most important at a particular time in your life, whether being home with your child is important, or whether you know, working that 70, 80 hours so that you can become a partner is important. And then tell the kids, Daddy'll be right back in like 5 years. So just hold on, wait for me.
You're just spinning plates. You're just spinning one plate, spinning the other plate, making sure that they all stay up.
Well, no, because see, I don't think they can all stay up at the same time. I really don't believe that. Everybody thinks, oh, you can have it all, you can do it all at the same time. It's just not true. It's not true. I mean, I think my life is an example of somebody who did everything sequentially. Get a good job, get a good education, get a good job, buy a nice house, become a federal judge. I woke up at 44 and said, seemed like there's something I forgot to do. Oh my God, I forgot to have a baby. But it wasn't too late. It was too late for me to have a baby, but it wasn't too late for me to parent, which was my priority. I wanted to parent. I felt like I had something to offer. And so, but all my friends had kids 20 years before me, so everybody else has grandchildren. I got a kid in college, so I'm still paying tuition. It is what it is. You can do everything well, not at the same time. Would I be a federal judge if I'd been married with children in my 20s? Probably not. I mean, I devoted all my time to work and community work, and to the exclusion of my personal life. Is that a model? I don't necessarily think so. I think everybody has to do what's best for them at the time.
Right.
So has it worked out fine for me? Absolutely. But am I promoting work like a fiend all through your 20s and 30s so that you can get your pinnacle career job by the time you're in your mid 30s, and then wake up one day in your 40s and say, oh my God, I need a baby. Is that a model? No. Was it the absolute perfect thing for me? Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, that's very nice to hear and super refreshing, just along the theme of there's not just one way to succeed. There's no like correct order of operations. It's doing what's right for you in that particular moment of time, which I think is a model to emulate at the end of the day, and everyone in their own way. So and I didn't know this about you, and so it's very powerful to hear, I think, this story.
I mean, I remember when my son was little, he was, I don't know, a soccer player. So he was 6, 7, 8 years old. I don't even remember how old. And our nanny went with him to one of the games. And I came home and he said, I was the only kid at the game today without a parent. Everybody had a parent there but me. Nannies are not allowed to take to the game. Nannies can only take to practice. I got one parent. I'm gonna need my one parent to be with me at all my games. I was like, okay, I'll be there at every game then. I'm not gonna let that fall through the cracks again. And so that was important to him. He's like, everybody has to have at least one parent in a game. My one parent was not there. That's not a thing. We're not doing that anymore. Got it. You don't have to tell me twice.
Wow, that's remarkable. And then I think how Femi started this sort of line of questioning, in that you were doing all this parenting while making time like for these personal projects that you were also doing in addition to your career. And I think of how, I mean, again, not just in the legal profession, but I think in any job, it's important to have time for what you want to do and what you want to create, and making time for it and making.
You know what I call that, Patrick? I call that hard work. Your job might be your hard work, but it doesn't necessarily have to always be. It just might be how you make your money to make your family happy. And your heart is attached to your family and making a life for yourself and all of that. So everybody needs some hard work on the side, something that you would do just because you enjoy it, because it just makes you happy, because it fulfills another part of your soul. Just making money is the only goal. That cannot be your only goal, because that's it's not going to be enough at the end of the day. You have to have something else that you do just for fun. My other little side hustle thing that I do on the side that's just for fun mostly, I mean, for me, is I do voiceover work. So I give a lot of speeches.
Wow.
And so I was given a speech in California. And after I gave my speech, the woman who was getting the award at the event that I was at, her name is Robbie Reed. She's the talent scout for BET. And she went to my same undergraduate college. She went to Hampton University in Virginia. And when I sat down, she said, you have one of the best voices I've ever heard. You need to do voiceover work. When you go home, take voiceover lessons. And I was like, okay. So I came home, I took
Femi's
voiceover
heard
lessons.
this before.
Like he doesn't know this story. He's like, what?
Why we're doing a podcast.
I came home and I took voiceover lessons for a while, and then I started telling people, hey, you know, I do voiceover work, and people just started hiring me all the time. So I have a little studio in my house, in my closet.
Wow.
And why do I have time to do voiceover work in my little studio in my closet? Because I'm home at night with my kid. I'm home.
Exactly. That's awesome. That's super awesome.
Really
People
cool.
send me work to do. I go in my little closet. My son knows if the door's shut, that means don't come in because I'm recording. And so I do voiceover work for Sirius Radio. I do promotional videos for like institutional videos for organizations and institutions. I do some work for the Houston Sports Authority. I'm the house announcer sometimes at the George R. Brown. And so I was doing it one time with the George R. Brown, and one of the board members for the Houston Sports Authority asked the president, who's that voiceover person?
Yeah.
Who's that announcer? That announcer has a really good voice. And she said, that's Judge Gilmore. And he said, no, I'm talking about the person on the loudspeaker. She said, yeah, it's Vanessa Gilmore. And they came up in the sound booth, and I'm in there doing my thing, and I look up and I said, hey, how y'all doing? And they're like, what are you doing here?
Yeah.
Like, I'm your house announcer.
That's really, really fun.
That's the last thing I thought I would learn during this podcast. I don't know where I would have learned that, but that's.
I love doing voiceover work. It's fun. It doesn't pay a lot. But I'm not doing it for that, because I just do it. It's just enjoyable. I like doing it. It's interesting. Sometimes it's just silly, but I've done a lot of videos for like banquets and stuff, like, you know, the video that they show at banquets for different organizations.
Yeah.
I've done a lot of those.
I'm sure you get to read a lot of weird copy sometimes.
Yeah, the work I do for Sirius, it's a lot of trivia stuff, and so I do like a little trivia thing for them every month. And then I do on-hold advertising, like you're on hold. You ever wonder whose voices those are when you're on hold waiting for the eye doctor to pick up, and you say, while you're waiting for your appointment today, did you know that we have contacts for myopia?
I'll have to say I'm normally like upset at that person, whoever it is. So just I apologize in advance.
The on-hold advertising, you don't want to hear any of that. You want to hear what other products we have while you're waiting for the product that you really want.
I'm trying to figure out why I got this bill or whatever it is. That's fun.
Right. Yeah. So I do some of that, and it's just, you know, it's interesting. Yeah. Who knows? I don't do a lot of it. Just once in a blue moon these days when someone calls me, but people call me. It's just kind of interesting.
Yeah. So Judge, let's turn back a little bit to your work as a judge, especially since you spoke about, you know, how long is this appointment? It's for a lifetime appointment, and you've decided to retire in January 2022.
Yes.
So, you know, what's next for you? I guess maybe just as a first question, you know, why now? And what's next?
Well, I've been doing this for 27 years. You know, at the time I went on the bench, I was the youngest federal judge in the country. I've been on the bench a long time. We have something called the rule of 80. You can retire after 65 and 15 years of service. So by the time I'm 65, which I'm not 65 yet, but by the time I'm 65, I'll have like 95 years of service, because I just went on so young. I went on so early. I could stay for the rest of my life until whenever. I just feel like I have some more stuff that I'm supposed to do. I have a lot of energy and a lot of interest of things that I'd like to explore. And I think that 27 years is a good point for me to just move to the next part of my journey and figure out what else is out there for me. So I'm looking for my next opportunity. I don't know what it's going to be. It's not like I said, oh, I'm leaving because I'm getting ready to go do X, Y, or Z. That's not what it is. I just feel like the right thing is going to come along for me at the right time. I'm not opposed to going back into a firm and maybe practicing law, possibly remediation work. I'm like to explore the possibility of doing some corporate boards. Maybe something in the education arena. I just think that the right thing is going to show up for me at the right time. And I'm open to whatever is divinely meant for me. And I've just always been fortunate in a way where the right thing always seems to find me. And I think that the right thing will find me this time. And so I am open to opportunities and looking for opportunities, because I
Yeah.
fully intend to keep working. My mom is 85 years old and she still works. She keeps trying to quit. And every time she quits, she gets offered another contract, like with the CDC.
Wow.
And she's like, why do these people want me to keep working? I'm 85 years old. I was like,
Yeah.
I know. So she's not working right now because she decided she wasn't working during COVID, but they keep calling her, asking her, does she want a contract working for CDC doing hiring? Because she does human resources work. So I think I have a lot of years of working left ahead of me, and I want to see what the next part of the journey is going to be like for me. I think that if somebody thinks that I can be value added for them, then I want to explore what that might look like. No matter what the setting is, whether it's, doing corporate board work or whether it's in a law firm setting, in an education setting, whatever it is, if somebody thinks that I can be value added, that's something that I want to explore and look at this point in time in my life.
One thing you could do, since you're already, an established voiceover work artist, you could start a podcast.
I could. Is it hard to monetize those, Femi? I'm still paying college tuition and a lot of it.
I actually think with your profile and your ability to, speak, you could pay them off easily. if you haven't already.
Well, if you hear of something that you think is meant for me, let me know.
Yeah. Do you have any words of advice to, your would-be successor?
Oh, my would-be successor. Work hard, stay current and up to date on your work. I think it's the least that we can do for parties and lawyers and litigants is to stay current on our work, because it drives lawyers and their clients crazy when they can't get a decision in a timely manner. And so never get, behind is what I would say. Just always try to stay caught up on your work. I think that's just the most important thing that we can do. Right or wrong, just make a decision, because people need to move on with their lives and people need to figure out, what's going to happen to the business or what's going to happen with the situation that whether it's an insurance issue or injury issue. People just need to be able to have timely disposition of their cases and their litigation so that they can get on with their lives. So stay current on your work. Don't get on the slowpoke list. There's the Texas lawyer does that thing every 6 months where they produce the slowpoke list, like judges who have too many cases pending. Don't get on the slowpoke list. Just don't.
That's fun. Thank you so much, Judge Gilmore. This has been fantastic. Really appreciate your time on this Sunday afternoon.
Absolutely.
Femi might have as we close, his fun question. I'm not sure what it'll be.
What's the fun question? Femi, do you have a fun question for me?
I definitely have a fun question, but I have one more question, which is particular to you. So the first time that I met you in person, you said, "Hi, I'm Judge Gilmore. What's your claim to fame?" And I definitely immediately started sweating because I wasn't expecting this question. But
Because
I think
you know why I do that, Femi? Because people, when they meet you, they want to give their daggone resume. That is boring. If you get in an elevator on the 30th floor and Bill Gates gets on there, you don't want to start telling your resume. You need to have some claim to fame. You need to be able to have something short, quick, pithy, and interesting that makes him say when he gets to floor one, I want to keep talking to this person. But people have a tendency, when you say, tell me something about yourself, if you just say, tell me something about yourself, they start doing their resume. Well, I went to undergrad at such and such and such, and then I went to law school, such and such a place, and I've been practicing law at the such and such law. That is just so boring. When I ask people their claim to fame, I find out something about them that is so different and interesting and makes me want to continue having a conversation with them, so that I can get to know them a little bit better. I've never, ever been disappointed in hearing when people really dig down and figure out what their claim to fame is. It's always something that makes me say, wow, what an interesting person. Like, Patrick, what's your claim to fame?
Oh man, I was going to ask Femi what he said.
No.
Listen.
It's your turn, Pat. What's your claim to fame?
Ooh, my claim to fame? Oh man, this isn't fair. So the only thing I can say is that I
me,
finished
but
high
I
school
got
at
y'all.
16 as well, but
Say it again.
I finished high school at 16 as well, but that's so
Okay.
old now. It's not really a current fact about myself.
Well, then you
Ooh.
can add something to that to make it to sort of
Spice it up.
round out and round out the whole story about who you are. I mean, when people ask me that, like if someone walks up to me at a party and says, you know, who are you? They don't know who I am. I say, I'm Vanessa Gilmore. I'm fabulous. You should know me. And then they're like, oh, is she really fabulous? What's fabulous? But if you say that, if that's your claim to fame, that you're fabulous and people should get to know you, then you actually have to be fabulous. And see, if you're not fabulous and you say that, then it's a big letdown. So
Yeah.
you can say, I say I'm fabulous, you should get to know me. I've always been the youngest every place I've ever been. I was the youngest graduate of my high school at 16 years old. I was the youngest freshman at my college, Hampton University in Virginia. I was the first University of Houston student to become a federal judge. At the time I became a federal judge, I was the youngest federal judge in the country. I got my child at 45 years old. Then I was the oldest. My child at 45 years old. But I've written 4 books since he's been born, and I've been on the bench for 27 years. And I'm still fabulous. I mean, you've got to have something to back it up. So if you're fabulous, you can say you're fabulous, but you better have something to back it up with, right?
Yeah.
But Patrick, what's your claim to fame? I gave you a few seconds. I bought you some time. What's your claim to fame?
I don't know if I can be famous for anything. I really like talking. I mean, I like getting to know people. Like it's
okay. So you get on an elevator with Bill Gates and you say, "Hi, I'm Patrick. I really like talking." And he's like, "Okay, weirdo." You better come up with one.
I do need to come up with
Things that
one.
people have said to me in the past are, one guy, this lawyer that I know, I don't know anything about his background. He said, when I was a teenager, I got pulled up on the stage and got to dance with Michael Jackson at the concert. I was like, oh my God, that's cool. And another woman, lawyer that I know, she says, on the weekends, I ride in a female motorcycle gang with a bunch of women because we just like riding motorcycles. Another woman told me she plays powder puff football on the weekend. She's in a female football league. That's her claim to fame. Other people have told me about, you know, they were track stars in high school and won like statewide championships. Just all kinds of interesting things that you just never thought about or realized. I mean, these people just have completely interesting lives. I've met you know, and gotten to know people that are great golfers because they told me stories about, you know, their golf conquests. I'm a golfer. That, of course, that makes me interested. I want to keep talking to you because I'm looking for people to play golf with all the time. I found people that were salsa dancers as a result of asking that question. I'm a salsa dancer. I like to find people that like to salsa dance. So it's just, it's, you know, your whole life is not, I think this is what happens to people. They confuse what they do with who they are. And when you ask people something about themselves and they start describing to you what they do, that's not interesting because that doesn't tell you who they are. It doesn't tell you anything about who they are. And so don't confuse what you do with who you are. You know, who you are is so much deeper than I'm a trial lawyer or I'm a, what kind of lawyer did you tell me you were, Patrick? I forgot.
Arbitration.
I'm a lawyer who does arbitration. Oh, okay. Whatever. That's just what you do. That's not who you are.
Yeah.
Femi, would you tell me what's your claim to fame?
I don't remember exactly, but my most recent one is that I beatboxed in front of the Jimmy Kimmel audience. I beatboxed in front of the Jimmy Kimmel. I can't say Kimmel.
Jimmy Kimmel.
That was
you beatboxed out live?
Yeah, it was 2018. I went to LA and got tickets with a friend of mine, and they were like, "Oh, who has a talent?" And I said I can beatbox. So I went in front of the audience and I beatboxed for a little bit, and I got a T-shirt.
I love it. I love it. See, that makes me want to keep talking to you because you know what it tells me? This is the person who's self-confident. This is a person who is adventurous. This is a person who is fun and funny. This is a person who's not embarrassed to get up there and be in front of people and speak in front of people. It tells me it's a person who enjoys life and isn't afraid to let people know that they enjoy life. Just in that little
Yeah.
clip, that's what I get from that. A fun, interesting, full of life person that is somebody that I'd like to get to know.
Yeah, I would
High
say
praise. Thank you.
Femi's good at everything he does. If I told you that I was in my
No.
in my what is it, law school musical production for a couple of years.
Well, there you go.
It was
Yeah.
fun.
That's something. You see, that's something. It tells me who you are, not what you do.
Yeah.
People get so hung up on what they do, you know, and instead of talking about who they are at their soul, you know. So that's my advice. Talk about who you are, not what you do, and do not get the two confused. That's why I asked that question. What's your claim to fame?
Yeah.
You know, because your claim to fame is something different than tell me your resume.
Yeah.
You know, that's a completely different question.
Yeah.
Or tell me what you do for a living.
Yeah.
You know. Okay. I mean, because it's just different. It's not the same thing. And it's not the kind of thing that's going to make people keep wanting to talk to you 5 minutes after you walk away. They're never going to think about you again. Somebody who's beatboxing in front of Kimmel, people want to keep talking to him because it's so interesting. It's so funny and it's cute, you know? I'm a good talker and I like to get to know people. I don't care about that.
I don't know if I'm a good talker. I prefer asking questions than answering them.
Okay, so we've been stalling for you, Patrick. You know, I'm still trying to circle back to you.
No, I think that would be my answer at this point. That I did my law school musical for 2 years.
But you need to say what you did in the musical and who you were.
Who I was.
Yeah, who you were in the musical.
It's always a parody. I think I was Baloo in our Disney production, The Bear from Jungle Book, who I didn't even know how to name until that happened. And then I was that Game of Thrones character that second year, Littlefinger.
Oh, you were little. Yeah, you were.
I think I was Littlefinger. Peter Baelish, Littlefinger.
Yeah.
My second year. Okay. I helped write that. Yeah, it was fun because I got to help write the script. But,
good. You gotta have a claim to fame. You gotta have a claim to fame. You gotta be somebody so interesting that people want to just keep talking to you.
Right.
You know. So that's that. So you guys thought that y'all were gonna, you know, turn the question on me, but you got the question turned back on you.
I should have seen this coming, but I really
should have seen this coming. I've got Timmy thought he had one trick question up his sleeve. It didn't work.
I know it's almost as if she asks people questions for a living. Just handle this so well. So
I like it.
This is the question, okay? Judge, if you are in the courthouse and decide, you know, you brought a lunch, but you don't want it, and so you're going to go into the tunnels, where would you stop? Where would you go for lunch?
Oh gosh, I so seldom go over there. I don't even know what's over there anymore, Femi. I hate to sound all snotty, but I don't ever walk to the tunnels anymore. Okay. The only thing that I know that's over there is the Starbucks, and I'd go over there to get coffee and maybe a cookie or something, but I don't know the names of any restaurants anymore. Oh, that sounds so snotty, doesn't it?
Listen, no, we can reform this. So if you were going to go for lunch at any period in time, and it's, you know, you want to treat yourself, where would you go in Houston?
So from work, you know, usually I'm trying to find someplace that's close, and in my sort of close go-to place that has this great lunch is Oporto. It's a Portuguese restaurant over in Midtown. And so it's easy to get to, and it's easy to get in and out of. And so, you know, from work, if it's during the day and I'm trying to find someplace good to go real quick during the day, I go to Oporto a lot. I love it. If you haven't been there, you should check it out.
Yeah, I'm going to check it out for sure.
Yeah. They have a good business lunch thing that's really fast, and the food is amazing. And so I go there a lot for lunch.
Perfect. Well, once again, thank you so much for joining us. This has been an amazing interview. You know, we've all learned about you, and Patrick has learned a lot about himself as well.
Got some more self-reflection to do, but
Well, thank you guys for having me. I really appreciate you. You're asking me so many interesting and thought-provoking questions, and who knows? Interview me again in a year, and I'll tell you where I've landed or where I've ended up.
Definitely.
You have a great end of your day.
All right, take care, guys.
Take care, Judge.
Bye-bye.